My name's David Porte Beckefeld. I'm an artist and designer. Sometimes I'm an art director, sometimes I'm a creative director. It depends on what the project requires of me at the time. But a big fan of what the studio produces, and thank you so much for having me today, James. I really appreciate it. Cool. So to get stuck into it, I'm going to go right to the beginning. This is me when I was like 2 years old. I was born in July 1990 in Sydney, Australia. I grew up in Sydney, Australia. My background is my mum is Spanish and my dad's half English, half Hong Kong Chinese. This diagram will tell you who I'll be going for in the UEFA final. So moving on to like early influences for me. So on the right, this is an Amiga system from 1985. My dad owned this system, and I used it when I was like 2 or 3 years old, I think. It was like my first foray into computing and all things digital, really. And I remember playing Street Fighter on it. And I think as kids in the 90s, like just being exposed to like physical media, packaging, typography, and just how like turbo capitalist the 90s were, I was being exposed to all this design at such a young age. And I still play like a lot of these old games today, and I think I've always just been influenced by like just the experiences that I had as a kid, playing games, experiencing music, the electronic music, dance music, the packaging associated with all of these experiences, and like the colors, and just everything was just so graphic back then, and like you got to experience it tangibly. I was watching a video recently about like how we valued music and games and movies so much more in the last 20, 30 years because there was so much more friction. So you had to go and buy that thing, and you had to look after it, and you had to preserve it, and then you had to put it into something and commit to it and listen to it. And I still try and do that today. I watch VHS movies, I listen to CDs, I have a mini disc player, I still use my iPod, and I kind of almost appreciate the things more, even though I can just go listen to something on Spotify. So, and this is the exact discipline I had as a kid as well. I'm a massive car enthusiast. From a young age, playing Gran Turismo on PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. It was just like a whole world opened up to me when I was when I popped that disc in, and I got to buy cars, race them, modify them, and play in that world. So taking all of these influences into creative exploration for the first time in my life was through my first Photoshop that I ever got, which was Photoshop 6. My auntie would like come over when we have like a family barbecue or something like that, and she would bring a very legitimate copy of Photoshop, and I remember like opening the software and just like drawing around and not really quite understanding how to use it, but I really enjoyed creating in this tool. And then she'd like come over another year, and it'd be the new Photoshop 7, and I have these like vivid memories of like these different splash screens and all the different versions. And I remember I would play with pre-made brushes quite a lot, and that was kind of my first interactions with like what I now know as design or art making. I played with Flash quite a lot. My best friend James, as kids, we would make Flash games together. We would be on Newgrounds a lot, and that was kind of the introduction to keyframes and animation and things like that. The stuff I made wasn't very good. He was actually got quite good at like coding within Flash and making interactivity and buttons and things. But yeah, that was really fun. So the things that I would make, when I was like 14 or 15, I would upload them to a platform which is actually still around, DeviantArt. And you can see that in my bio, my favorite photographer was me. My favorite operating system was Windows XP. And yeah, I would make these like very early explorations into like composition, shape, color, topography, and just kind of like getting a feel for these things. I had no prior knowledge of like design or anything like that, and yeah, obviously it's like very subpar work, but like you kind of see like a framework for like just things that I wanted to do and make, and they were kind of just like wallpapers for me as a kid that I would have on my computer. As I was kind of got into my teens, I would still play around in Photoshop. I would do like logos for like friends' online stores and stuff. And my kerning and tracking was horrible. So it's good to just include things like that, you know. But of all things, after I finished high school, I was studying financial planning, which I hated. It was the career path that my dad chose, and he never like forced it upon me, but I was like interested in it because I thought like, oh, maybe if I uh, work a good job, I can earn good money and then pursue the things that I enjoy. But at that time, there were these ads running for like financial advice through AMP, and these ads were produced by a Sydney-based studio called Toby and Pete, which were you know, utilizing 3D in an interesting way and typography around 2012. And I remember seeing these ads being like, I'm much more impacted by like how this looks than what the messaging is, and the messaging is related to what I'm doing. So I don't think I'm doing the right thing with my life. And that's when my mum said to me, she's like, don't serve what isn't serving you. Uh, she sat me down and she said, like, if you were to do something every day of your life and it didn't really matter how much money you made, what would you do? And I said, like, oh, just play in Photoshop and be creative. So the next week I researched like what universities would be good to go learn design at, and I found Billy Blue. It was like 15 minutes from my house. And throughout my research, I also found this poster by Luca Inescu, who is a Sydney-based topographer. And it said, do what you like. And I thought, you know what? I am going to do what I like. And I enrolled within months after that. So on the left is like my core group of friends that I made at uni. Everyone is mostly still in 3D design until today. I've worked on countless projects with them. The kind of camaraderie and friendship we all had together in university was a real catalyst for us kind of almost competing with one another, or like trying to achieve like the best work we could produce in university together. And yeah, an awesome bunch of guys. This is some of my early exploration into like graphic design and learning, you know, how to properly set type, how to communicate an idea, the fundamentals of visual communication. And if you didn't use a PSD mockup in the early 2010s, like, what were you doing really? Because the grip that had on me, you would believe. Learning like how to make logos, getting into like custom hand lettering typography, that was kind of like all the rage in that time. And I was definitely very inspired by type and like the forms in which letters could take shape really interested me. Learning like layout design, like just all the design fundamentals. I would do like cash jobs for friends, being very much in like the car scene, making like car stickers and things like that. On the right, Hopeless and Hellbound was a clothing brand that I ran with my friend Tim Grove, who's a very talented 3D artist and creative director. Still one of my best friends to this day. This is like some early work in like character design that we did at uni. I'm not even like a character person, but it was interesting to learn about how to practice hard surface modeling, like the basics of 3D shaders, textures, lighting, and yeah. So during that time, when I was at uni, Alex Troche was a huge influence on me. I remember when I first saw his work, it really impacted me, and it was like topography that I had never seen could look so explosive and so interesting. And I remember I picked up this book, and it was really cool. Like you have it out in the light, and then when you take it to like a darker area, like it had this kind of like second layer to it where it glowed and revealed like a whole alternate cover. Very, very creative application of print. And yeah, his topography, just like especially this one on the right, the New Classics. I remember when I first saw it, it like just really impacted me. And like the liquid like forms that take shape in the letter forms, I think is probably one of the reasons why I just love such like organic shapes and things that I do even now in 3D. I think were influenced from this time. So my journey from like design into art, I think was deeply affected when I kind of realized that like design is creativity for function and art is creativity for expression. There has to be like some kind of objective purpose to something that is creative when it is made for design. Whereas, you know, with art, like you can have someone like half naked, like banging a drum in like a white room in a gallery, and it doesn't have to make sense. Like that person's expressing themselves. It's not my favorite kind of art, but no one can tell that person that that's not art because it's doing what its utility is, even if it doesn't have one. And yeah, this is kind of my early like maybe digital art expressions. I remember I graduated uni and I was working at some different agencies and studios, and when the work day would finish, I would take like a photo out the window, or I'd take a photo of something like random on my desk, and I would just manipulate it and like create these like colorful, layered, gradient mapped Drost effect artworks. And I didn't even know why I was creating them, but I found it fun to be using my design knowledge to create art. And yeah, it was really rewarding. This is some early explorations into making 3D art. This was before GPU-based renderers, which is also like kind of what I learned on at uni, using CPU-based rendering, and it's a lot slower, like much a bit trickier to work with, I think, in just the feedback you're getting as you're working. During this time, I was doing a lot of work with music artists. My best friend James, who I used to make Flash games with, he ended up becoming the drummer in Rufus Du Sol, and they would get me to make gig posters, and I'd meet other artists and music label contacts, and they would ask me to create a single cover or an EP cover. And I was really enjoying this because it was like this almost like freedom within design that I'd never experienced before to make art, but it had a purpose. It was really like blurring the lines of design and art. And when the budgets for music work are good, like it's some of the best work I think you can cut your teeth on, because you're being paid to like be artistic, but with design sensibilities. I would make a lot of these covers in Illustrator. I'd use the mesh tool. I'd use lots of gradients, and I just found a lot of solace in using a lot of color. I thought it was quite interesting, and it made me feel like I was able to express kind of ideas and thoughts I had. And it was definitely like at a point where I was like just starting to like diversify my interests in like you know, what it meant to be creative. And I kind of around this time it was like 2016 by this stage. I discovered like film photography. I met my beautiful partner, Jess. We've been together like 7 or so years now. She's creative director at Studio Mesa in Sydney. And we would just like when we first started dating, we would just shoot so much film together. I think I would go through like 2 rolls in a weekend. And now, unfortunately, film's kind of gotten a bit more expensive, and that's like double the price to do now. But I haven't even published any of these photos. I just I don't know. I was on a roll, just taking lots of pictures, and I think that was really helpful for just like finding composition in areas outside of design, outside of art, and just having fun with that. And as someone who loves to collect things, collecting moments is kind of what photography has always been for me, and just preserving moments in history. This is from a trip in Japan that we went to in 2017, and we hired a Porsche 911 and drove to Mount Fuji, which was an awesome experience, and I have very fond memories of that. So moving on to like 2017, I was kind of taking what I was doing in Illustrator, and I had my first art exhibition. I would take like songs by musicians that I knew in the scene at the time in Sydney, and interpreted their song into a poster. And again, like lots of mesh tool, lots of gradient mapping, mostly vector, and it was fun because like you could print something as big or as small as you want when everything was a vector. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this show. I was doing a lot of like object-based or still life or compositional things that kind of look like 3D, but in 2D with these gradients in Illustrator. And it was kind of around this time that I thought like, oh, I need to kind of get back into 3D. Like felt like I was kind of hitting a ceiling with what I could do in Illustrator and how I was able to express myself. But yeah, these were still really fun to make, and at some point I would like to maybe revisit doing things in Illustrator again, but I'm still way too distracted by 3D. And a big push to kind of move into this space was David McLeod's work. For me, he was and is like just one of the best at still life, procedural. He has an amazing array of like colors and forms, and this is his work from around that time that was really influencing me. I loved like the collision of materiality, and the palettes he chooses are amazing. And around that time, a friend of mine was actually a friend of his, and I asked him if I could grab his contact details and reach out, and we started chatting. Yeah, that was almost 10 years ago, and now we're great friends. I speak to him quite frequently, and is still a great source of inspiration for sure. So I then picked up Octane Renderer, which is a GPU-based renderer. So my lighting got better, my materials got better, my textures got better, but my work was still not up to scratch with what my inspiration was. And I think it's still always a good thing, because I think when you're learning art or design, like your taste is what's driving you. Like you see things you like and you want to produce at that level, or you want to make at that level, and you're kind of just constantly like sharpening your tools until you get to the point where you're making the thing that is inspiring you, or it's kind of reaching that same level or quality. So around that time, I'd still kind of, I just dive into 3D and I just like mash shapes together, and I wasn't really like using the tool properly. I was just like jamming like primitives together and just putting nice lighting. And that's also kind of like the beauty of Octane. Like you can kind of just chuck a light and a sphere and a scene, and like you kind of get something that looks good. It's very forgiving like that. and these were the first like commercial uses of 3D that I did in that time. On the left was an album cover for this artist Thompson, which was through Sony Music, and I took all the songs in his album and I put them all into Ableton as one giant waveform, and then I plotted that in Illustrator, which is how I got like the shape on the side. I extruded it in the Z-axis, and then the texture on the top was the mountains that were kind of near his house that he liked to go like on a walk and explore and be inspired by. And that was how I envisioned creating like topography of the album itself and visualizing that. And then for this gig poster on the right, I took the shapes on the DJ's shirt and just traced them in Illustrator and extruded them, and created this kind of like fun surrounding shapes to promote it. And I think like if you're kind of getting into 3D and you don't really know how to model, using Illustrator and extruding things is kind of like just such a hack, because there's so much stuff that you can make, and all you're doing is like just extruding something in one dimension and like rounding the corners a little bit nicely so it doesn't look too sharp, and like you already have unlocked like so much more than you can create, rather than just like dragging a sphere or a cube into a scene. So as I kept like kind of honing and practicing like within 3D, I would explore you know, a bit more materiality and try and kind of like gravitate back to like what I was trying to achieve in Illustrator, and that was, you know, heavily anchored in like color, composition, the relationship between objects. And I would start to like build these like scenes again that I was trying to make 2D but in 3D, and you know, trying to get better with lighting, trying to get better with materiality, learning about like PBR workflow, like physical based materials. And that design on the left ended up becoming like a collaboration with a Sydney based clothing brand at the time, New Goods. And it was just really fun to see like something that I'd made in 3D, like screen printed onto a shirt. I made my first zine called Iridescent Embrace, and I was just like filling it with like all these different frames that I was working on at the time. And the easiest way I was like replicating kind of what I was doing in Illustrator was I would create a scene, make everything in the scene like a metal or silver material that was like very reflective, or just have like a very subtle roughness on it. And then the HDRI or the lights in the scene were light emitting gradients, and it would just color the scene very similarly to what I was doing in Illustrator, but it was entirely 3D. I'm just gonna have a sip of water. So I remember the first time I did that, I was kind of like I'd bridged a gap in my brain of like, oh, I can kind of like do the same thing now, but I've unlocked all this other stuff. So this was my first experience working at a studio. I worked at Buck in 2018 on this Nike project. And at first it was really daunting. I felt like I probably wasn't like skilled enough to be there. I would definitely like show some of my design frames at the end of the day, and they'd be like, yeah, you're kind of getting there. And you know, that's just part of the process. I think to get good at anything, you have to fail many times at it. And that's something that I even like, you know, still try and like hold on to today whenever I'm learning like a new plugin, a new software, or trying to just stay on top of you know, whatever's changing and what it is that I'm working on. Which brings me on to my next point, and I think that's make time for personal work. I've kind of grown so much as both a designer and an artist by producing personal work, producing work for myself. The amount of times I've posted something and then a producer or someone at a studio or an agency has seen that and they're not going to hire me perhaps to do the thing that I posted, but there's confidence induced in the fact that you know, they've seen like the level of thinking or application that went into that personal piece of work that you created. But it's not even just for that. It's very like satisfying personally to just make something for you, and whether that's making art as a designer or designing something if you're an artist every day, you know, just taking yourself out of what it is that you normally do and exploring a different area with the same creative tools that you have. And yeah, so in 2019, I moved into a studio space with my friend Chris Andrew Small, and that was really fun. We worked on a bunch of stuff together, like this piece here, Carrera Forever. Chris and I are both car enthusiasts. Probably me more so than him, but he does have a great appreciation. And I took, I think, like 3 or 4 of his like 2D Photoshop artworks, digital artworks, and I blended them with different procedural noises, and basically like mapped them across this 911 Carrera, and it was like this like very like crazy chaotic livery that you know, very much embodies kind of like a mixture between like the way I like to kind of render things, very locked off shots. I love using a high focal length, and you know, Chris's very chaotic 2D work. And we also made it into a blanket, which was like quite fun. Like seeing a render like woven in threads was just like so weird and random and really rewarding. And it has like a fun stretch Futura lockup that Chris loves to do. This is an artwork that I did that was commissioned by One Piece, the anime, and it was an exhibition that was on in Japan where they commissioned lots of different artists to just take things from the universe of One Piece and interpret them in an interesting way. And I think when I made this artwork, I really felt like I'd started to kind of take all of the things that I'd learned up until that point and really like bring it into like a dynamic composition with like very interesting, very colorful kind of gradients, and just the way things kind of feel like they have flow and direction. Was yeah, really satisfying at the time. I met this great friend, Matt. He owns the brand Highs and Lows, which are based in Perth in Australia. And he approached me and said, you know, they're working on an Adidas collaboration with his brand, and he would love me to kind of give kind of my spin on it. And I did a 3D motion piece to promote the shoe. I had an additional motion designer on, and we kind of just blocked out how I kind of imagined all the shots could flow, taking different parts of technology from the shoe and the tennis influence. The original shoe is called Torsion Edberg, which is named after a tennis player. And yeah, that was the first time I kind of like led a motion piece with different shots, and that was super rewarding as well. So around 2020, I really like delved into like sculpting in VR, and I was really influenced by Constantine Brancusi, who is a Romanian sculptor who has his atelier next to Centre Pompidou in Paris, which I actually visited like 2 years ago, which was amazing to experience in person. And he kind of like sculpts the essence of things, and it was quite interesting to try and like create forms that are like the most like distilled version of something. And that was definitely kind of like the ethos of and thinking behind like when I was making a lot of these sculptures. And these like vases kind of like came about very naturally. I found the software that I use is it was called Oculus Medium. Now it's called Adobe Medium because Adobe purchased it. And there's like a method of like, it's called a lathe tool, and basically like whilst you're sculpting, you can kind of like let your like pen kind of draw mesh, and it will kind of like follow like a lathe path or like a rotation, and that's how I was able to do these like vases. And I was just trying to make them look like they could be something like physical or tangible, but they're created entirely like digital, of course. Like I don't know anything about glazing or ceramics or firing things. Like half of these, like the one on the left, you could probably make it, but it would probably like snap as soon as you try and fire it. So yeah, creating outside of the bounds of what you could probably make physically with 3D is probably one of the more fun things that I enjoy doing as well. And I took some of these sculptures into interior spaces. I'd never really done an interior space before, and giving them a bit of context was like quite fun, because it gave them kind of a bit more life beyond the initial renders that I created, and imagining like what these spaces could look like. And this was during lockdown as well, so like in my small like bedroom, kind of feeling like creating these open vast spaces like was giving me like a breath of fresh air, and feeling like I was traveling to different spaces even though we were all kind of stuck inside. And Matt from Highs and Lows, who I did the Autodesk animation for, he saw those spaces, and he said like, oh, I'd love to commission you to do some like these like living spaces with like a grand view. They were almost kind of like a listening room for each of the Highs and Lows radio remix, like Highs and Lows Spotify playlists that he had creators come on and curate. So the one on the left was for Alex James, who runs the brand Pleasures, and the one on the right was for music artist Howls. So delving into my personal practice more, during this time I was like absolutely obsessed with Aphex Twin, still am. And when I created this like vase out of the Aphex Twin symbol on the logo, I had a lot of really great reception from it. And I kind of delved and did more research, and I learned that the creator of the logo was Paul Nicholson, and he was one of Richard Aphex Twin's friends. And like when he wasn't designing for him, he would dance on the stage and kind of act as Richard's like visuals in a way. I remember in an interview, Richard saying like he liked how it took attention from him when he was performing. And I reached out to him on Instagram, and that's probably my next point. Like, reach out to those that inspire you. There was something about that symbol that really resonated with me whilst I was listening to the music, and it was quite like this, I don't know, like emotional anchor for me. And yeah, we struck up a conversation. We got along really well, and we kind of thought like, why don't we do something interesting together? Like, we're both creatives. And I kind of proposed creating like an altered version of the Aphex Twin logo. And what I did is I took there's like these early diagrams of the design of the shape, and the kind of the ratios in which all the circles that make up the A. And I took circles out of the negative space from the center of the A and kind of like repositioned them down to the bottom left. So yeah, as a sculpture, it would sit level. And then I sculpted the whole thing in VR and took chunks out of the mesh. You can see on the right, that's me sculpting and taking parts out. And then I like filled it with this like gel substance. And I just wanted the artwork to just kind of feel like this otherworldly familiarity that listening to Aphex Twin's music kind of gave me. And throughout our conversations, it was really cool, just from like a design perspective, talking to someone who was like quite senior than me as a designer. He's, was making logos when I was playing Game Boy. And he said that when he created the logo, it was the first draft. There were no roughs, no redraws, no amendments. What you see is what was put down once, and that doesn't happen often. And not only like have I never experienced that almost in working with clients, but I just thought it was a real testament to how incredible that logo is, and just the reputation it's built up, and it's how synonymous it's become as a symbol, both for the artist and electronic music at large. This is a self-portrait that I did one day. I thought it'd be kind of fun if I like traced the hand controllers of my VR headset like across my body and make this like weird interpretation of myself. So that was really fun. Coming back to like how much like Gran Turismo inspired me as a kid, and like Colin McRae Rally, and just that 90s era of automotive enthusiasm, I created this piece called Art Rally in 2021, and it was an interesting exercise for me in both graphic design and 3D. I like made a series of different logos. I took all the different branding elements from the original car and then like redesigned them with my initials, or a new graphic, or like my face, my Instagram handle, like the city my mum was born, like when I was born, like my surname, my middle name. And it was just like, it was quite fun to kind of take all these things that I'd learned, earlier in my career, and kind of like sandwich it with like 3D and trying to create something new from that. And this ended up being part of a exhibition in Sydney in the galleries, which was awesome to see. This is one of my like favorite buildings in the city, mainly because it just has like an amazing ramen place on the roof, and I go there quite a lot. So in 2022, I was like heavily involved in like the NFT scene, to the point where I ended up in conversations with the Australian Open on creating an NFT collection for them. And it was myself, my friend Lewis Clark, and Nick Johnston, Nick, who I actually met in uni. And the three of us, alongside with a larger team that ended up supporting us to kind of pull this whole thing off, we pitched a concept where upon the final bounce of match point in a match, where the ball bounced, we divided the tennis court up by a grid of 6,776 plots, and depending on where the ball bounced, if it bounced on your coordinate with an NFT you owned, which was like a procedurally generated like art ball, you like won prizes, and you kind of like your NFT would update. And yeah, we won a Cannes Line Award for this project. Before I worked on this, I knew nothing about tennis, so that was probably like a pretty crazy career moment as far as the design projects that I've worked on. This is a artwork that I did in 2022, which was titled Stolen Objects from the Sea, and it was a collaboration with Uchronia Studio. They're based in Paris, and they made like a physical furniture piece to go along with this artwork. And it was exhibited at Paris Paris Design Week, and seeing something that I created, and kind of all these kind of like the abstract forms and the colors and the gradients and how things kind of evolved up until this point. Seeing that exhibited abroad internationally, it was like quite surreal for me. And then I started to take the forms that I was sculpting and kind of like distorting them by taking like the 3D camera within my 3D scene. I would like distort the lens with like a noise. So then like the sculptures themselves were kind of being distorted, but like in an optical way. And I think like, I don't think this is actually like possible to do in like in the physical world, but I really love just like how like weird and like and just like organic and like quite parametric the results kind of become. And I really wanted to kind of explore like what this could kind of look like in a physical space. So I created this 3D scene and kind of imagined up like what like a high budget, art exhibition could look like, featuring these artworks and complementary sculptures to kind of reflect these shapes in front of them. And uh, I'm always really interested in kind of like the do not touch element of being in an art gallery, and there's like a reverence that kind of exists for the work that perhaps outside of like religion or like sacred spaces in that context you kind of don't really experience in life. And um yeah I've always found that relationship between like the environment and what's being displayed quite interesting, and I wanted to kind of recreate that digitally uh, through these renders. This is a table that like I want to make at some stage. Moving into kind of like the physical space would be like kind of the next natural evolution for me at some stage, permitting costs. I think kind of taking it to that space and like having something like this like in a home would be super crazy to me, and something that I'm definitely willing to explore in the future. And then last year, this was probably like one of the crazier jobs that came into my inbox. I was asked to do a 3D anamorphic billboard commissioned by Nike and Jordan Brand for Travis Scott's album launch, Utopia. This is a curved display that is opposite the Staples Center in LA. And I was approached by Recess Studios by a contact there who was creative director at the time. And like he was just, I believe he just followed me on Instagram, and we kind of got talking. And this project was delivered in less than a week. We didn't like sleep, like barely ate. I remember when I was like uploading the final files, like we were just like so nauseous and like just completely out of it. But sometimes when you get asked to do something crazy, like you just have to kind of deliver with craziness. And yeah, a lot of the forms and shapes in this were all sculpted in VR. And yeah, this was a really fun project to work on, as stressful as it was. And then early this year, that same creative director, he was working freelance for its brand Flippers, and Usher did a collaboration rollerblade with them that he wore at the Super Bowl, which was super random, but kind of doing some interesting like mechanical like motion design for this. And we actually kind of made this animation inspired by a video piece that they'd kind of already filmed, but they wanted a little bit more like supplemental assets to show the construction of the shoe and kind of get a bit of a better brand feel for it. So yeah, this was also a really interesting job to work on as well. And then towards the end of last year, I was asked to exhibit at the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney. It was a place that you kind of like go to and experience like interesting like touch points as a kid that relating to like science or art and technology. And I'd actually been to a retro video game exhibition there as an excursion whilst I was at uni, which like I was like a kid in a candy shop there. And to have been asked to exhibit there as part of a group show that was curated by Culture Vault was super exciting. And I almost didn't know, I was almost like crippled and debilitated by like what to do for it. So I just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna like jam together like a whole bunch of things that I've created in like the last 6 years as kind of one giant collage. And it was like a really large wall projection. And seeing like all these kind of little like diptych moments of things that I'd created over the years was yeah, really rewarding for sure. So yeah, that's me from kind of my early influences as a kid until now, and things that I've kind of learned and things that I kind of like to pass on, and little highlights and moments of my design and art career. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
So yeah, if you have any questions, we're more than happy to speak to anything for sure.
Yeah, I've got questions. Well, go on, Marco. You go first. You can speak into the microphone.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I committed
Yes, he has the talking stick.
Early, so I well, first of all, thank you. It was amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yes, question for you. There is a very visible tactile element to all your work.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I can see throughout all the references you shared that you come from a similar era that I come from, where things were more real. So obviously there was the kind of experience happening. So the question is not that deep, I guess, but it's like, do you ever imagine a phase 2 for the design era, as in dealing with either an audience or the client or collaborators, where actually the experience is not as relevant anymore, just because they maybe so young, they come from a different age where things don't happen in real life, but they happen in another space. Do you ever think it will happen, and how that would impact your, as an artist, as a designer, your work? And thank you again.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the kind words. I think there are people that didn't get to experience a flip phone or an iPod that you kind of see on TikTok or something, found my mum's old phone. Wow, so cool, retro, and it's a Motorola V3 Razr that probably doesn't work. I think there's something kind of very human about just kind of rediscovering those things. I don't know if they'll ever die. I think maybe they'll be reproduced into different experiences, because there's always just merit in what the physical has to offer. How it would change my work, I don't know. I artistically, I'd love to make physical things, as I mentioned, but from a design perspective, I guess 3D printing is allowing for the things that we create in the 3D DCC application to be made tangible. Will we get holograms or things that kind of feel real but they're not? What kind of role will AI play in the future when we have robotics that are delivering a digital experience? Or maybe singularity will happen and none of it will happen. Who knows? But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
So it's interesting when you spoke about mini discs. You said you still use them. Do you still use a mini disc player?
Yeah, I do. I have a mini disc player. It was I tracked down the exact one that I wanted when I was a kid, and I bought it on eBay.
This is so this is a really really obscure question then, because I remember mini disc and I was so excited what it could be, because the devices themselves look so futuristic at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm born mid-80s. I think you're born in the 90s, did you say?
Yeah, 1990. I'm 34.
Okay. No, I'm interested in that because I still reminisce about that mini disc player, and I still remember the model number explicitly to the one that I had.
Yeah.
And I remember this is really odd. I've never spoken about this.
If you want to go into the rabbit hole, there's mini disc groups and stuff, and Discords and Facebook groups, and people that there's people that make mixes and they post them to people to discover new songs. It gets deep.
I just remember I had something called a Sony MZR91, which was this
yeah. I have an NZ10.
Okay, I don't know what that is, but I remember just even recently looking it up. It's this light blue mini disc player with an oval yellow screen that looked like some
sunglasses. It's the fitness model, I think, that one you're talking about. It was Yeah.
Maybe. I just remember
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
like
yeah.
it was
But
amazing.
yeah, like this is what I use while I'm working. It's like an iPod that has been like hacked with like flash memory. It's got 256 gigs, and then it's got like a little Bluetooth adapter. And like it's like completely distraction free. I don't have to deal with like Spotify Discover algorithm stuff, and it's just like nice to take a break from it and kind of experience a bit of tangibility. And that's kind of what the mini disc can offer as well. But yeah,
I was just showing the guys
like,
here the one I had. That was it, Ed. Yeah, it was kind of really cool.
I love nerding out on all this stuff.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. It was really good, really insightful. I really enjoyed the nostalgia trip at the start.
Yeah, it's always an anchor for me.
Yeah, it's really funny because I'm like, well, I'm 5 years younger than you, but I think I got inspired by design by playing things like Call of Duty and stuff like that, and got really into design through gaming. So for me, it was like similar parallels. But I was kind of curious what you think the sweet spot is between sort of the physical and digital, because I feel like your work now is so like almost otherworldly digital, but all your references, your lifestyle, your world is almost anti that. Like, what sweet sort of space in the future of design do we think where it's not digital or like purely analog, I guess?
Yeah, so that's a hard question to answer. So like something that like there's different things that are kind of in between those worlds. Like one of them I would say would be like this camera, for example. Like it's a Fuji X Pro 3, and it has like film emulation. So it's kind of like has this kind of like old world look to it, but it's like a new camera. I don't know how I could probably answer that question like relating to my work per se. I just think I need to kind of like just make the jump, and like try and make some of my things physical, and then I can kind of decide, oh, maybe I like this better. But like the limitations that the world, that's the only thing I don't like about it. Like I can make something so quickly digitally, and it doesn't have to be anchored in anything. I've got friends that are architects, and they're like, oh, I'm so envious of the things you create, because if I make something, it doesn't follow like biocode and the laws of the physical world that has to abide to. So there's so much freedom in that. So I think I kind of I cheat a little bit. I take only like the parts of things that I like. I rather than, but when you're married to one, you kind of have to deal with the good and bad of all of those things, you know. Yeah, if there's more of a specific, if there's more of a specific to that question that I didn't answer, like feel free to embellish.
Yeah, no, I think you did, to be honest. I think it's really tricky because I feel like at the moment technology is in that space because it's non-physical. It's hard for it not to be in a very what would seem quite clean digital space. But then there's something like you said, the charm of the iPod that feels like it doesn't do anything too much. It just does something that's simple.
Yeah, and also like
better.
It always works. Like if you go on a flight, the iPod works if it's charged. You know, if you have a game and you go and play it and you put the disc in, it just works. It doesn't it hasn't been removed from an online service or something. And there's a quote that I always think about, and it's called in the future you will own nothing and be happy. And it's like so depressing to think about that. Like you'll just pay for like 16 subscription services and never have to go shopping and never have to buy a movie, or I don't know, kind of scares me, but it sounds kind of convenient too.
I do wonder a bit, like sort of like films like Blade Runner, where they are still that kind of like human technology side, like whether the people will sort of get to a point of like fatigue with digital and kind of revert quite heavily, quite anti, and people go like, I don't want WhatsApp.
There's already like people already experience like subscription fatigue, and like I mean, like how many times do you like see something and you're like, what the hell, man? I've been paying for Disney Plus for like 3 months. I haven't used it. Like, there's just too many of those. There's so much of it now, and like, it'd be really nice if someone would consolidate it somewhere. But like, just as far as like IP and legalities and usage goes, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, because it feels like tech should be playful and fun and intentional. Whereas like, I get delivery ads on my Apple Watch, and I find that quite.
I don't have an Apple. I don't have an Apple Watch. Like, I'm open to having one, because some people have told me like, oh, I have an Apple Watch and it stops me from checking my phone. So like, we have a device now to not use the other device. It's pretty funny, but yeah.
So different from like Wall-E, we're all going to be really fat.
Yeah, exactly.
On a spaceship, searching for one that exists.
There was that, not to sort of drag this on, but there's this really cool thing I saw recently. It was called, I think it was called Terrain, which is this technology device.
Oh yeah.
It's like an analog, almost looks like a Tamagotchi type thing, and it basically directs you to where you go, but it doesn't have a screen or interface, and it like buzzes, beeps, and lights up.
You 3D print it yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the it was made by designed by Modem Works or something.
Yeah. That.
Yeah, the branding for that was really cool. It has like a little organic like character guy.
That for me feels like that really kind of interesting technology and real world meet really well. But yeah, that seemed really cool.
Yeah, I think I think in the future, like, perhaps we'll like really value things that are kind of designed without like trying to be everything. Like, the iPhone is an everything product, right? But perhaps, you know, we will find value in like taking away of things and just interfacing with them differently, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you answered my question now. So.
Sick. Wow, that makes me happy. I hate kind of being like, oh, it doesn't really answer your question, but like, whatever. Yeah, it was a super honor to speak for you guys and meet everyone, and yeah, we'd love to keep the conversation going. The only other thing I was going to mention is I'm available for freelance right now for anyone watching. I have one job running at the moment, but that's going to wrap soon. So if there's anything you want to come on, let me know.
Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for staying up so late. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, no worries. And yeah, thanks again so much for having me. And yeah, thanks to everyone who's watching in the interwebs, in the ether.
Take it easy.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.